You know, a company as absolutely massive as Walmart is always in the news for something. But what happens when we zoom way in on just a tiny 72-hour window? Well, it turns out you get this fascinating and honestly deeply conflicted picture of a corporate giant. Okay, let's dive into this.
So that's really the big question we're tackling here. I mean, can a quick snapshot of headlines actually reveal the inner workings, the pressures, and the priorities of a company that has over 2 million employees? Well, it turns out the answer is a pretty big yes.
And this right here is the period we're looking at. This timeline just shows you how unbelievably busy those first few days of April 2026 were for Walmart. Every single one of those dots is a story, and when you put them all together, they paint a picture that is anything but simple.
And what starts to emerge is this tale of two Walmarts. On the one hand, you've got a company that's battling these headlines that would absolutely cripple smaller businesses. And on the other hand, you have this massive retail machine that just keeps humming along, pushing its core message without ever missing a beat.
So let's really break down what that week looked like. First, we're going to look at the front page crisis. Then we'll shift over and explore all the business as usual stuff. And finally, we'll zoom out and try to make sense of what it all means.
Okay, so first up, the crises. And look, these weren't just some minor blips on the radar. We're talking about stories that completely dominated the news cycle, focusing on really severe safety and liability problems, things that strike right at the heart of how the company operates.
It all kicked off with this, just a truly horrific headline coming out of Conway, Arkansas. A fatal, totally random attack on an employee, happening right inside the store. As you can imagine, this story immediately went national, and it raised some profound questions about safety for both workers and customers.
And the thing is, this wasn't an isolated event, not even in that tiny 72-hour window. At the same time, news was breaking about an ATF agent opening fire during a robbery attempt in a Chicago parking lot, and a bomb threat forced a whole store evacuation over in Kentucky. So the big takeaway here is that a pretty clear pattern of in-store safety issues was emerging in the headlines.
But the crisis wasn't just about physical safety. A second massive story hit, a product recall. I mean, can you imagine? This headline sent an absolute shockwave through parents' group chats and social media feeds everywhere. Dinosaur chicken nuggets, a kid favorite, flagged by the USDA for possibly having lead in them.
You know, something like this triggers a whole chain reaction. It's not just about pulling a product off the shelves. It's a huge hit to consumer trust, and it comes with massive potential for legal trouble. And it makes everyone start asking, just how thorough is Walmart's process for checking the products it sells?
And then you see this. Right next to the tragic news of a fatal stabbing, you've got a local paper announcing that a new Dunkin' is going to open inside a Walmart. Wow, this just perfectly captures that jarring disconnect we're talking about. The two Walmarts literally side by side in your newsfeed.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of the story. Business as usual. Because while the crisis management team was in total overdrive, the rest of this corporate giant was just focused on its primary mission.
And what is that mission? It's all about value. This quote from a Business Insider article doing a price comparison is just incredibly powerful. At the exact same moment the company is weathering this storm of negative press, it's also winning on its core brand message: we have low prices.
And it wasn't just that one article either. Other news outlets were picking up on these specific, really attention-grabbing deals. A travel backpack for 70% off, a massive toolkit for less than half its price, a charcoal grill for just $25. This is the constant drumbeat of the Walmart brand, and believe me, it was playing loud and clear.
And on top of all the deals, the day-to-day operational news just kept on coming. Store remodels, new partnerships, standard announcements about Easter hours, and even typical corporate stuff like an executive leaving to go to a competitor. The giant machine of retail was simply churning on, almost completely unfazed.
So what are we supposed to make of all this? You've got these two totally opposite stories happening at the exact same time. Let's step back for a second and look at the bigger picture and see what this really tells us about Walmart.
Honestly, this chart right here pretty much says it all. When you actually analyze the sentiment of all the headlines from this period, it's almost a perfect one-third split. One-third positive, one-third neutral, one-third negative. This isn't a company having a bad week. It's a company having a Walmart week, a crazy mix of everything all at once.
And what this mixed bag of news really gives us is, well, it's almost like a balance sheet for the company's reality. On one side, you have very real, very serious risks. And on the other, you have these tangible, powerful opportunities that just keep the business thriving.
So here's what it all boils down to. The risks are huge. The safety of people and products, not to mention ongoing labor issues. But at the same time, the opportunities are just as powerful. A rock-solid reputation for value, continuous investment in the store experience, and promotions that clearly get people excited. This is the fundamental tension that's right at the heart of Walmart's reality.
And all of this really leaves us with one big question at the end of the day. When you operate on such a colossal, global scale, is this constant chaotic storm of good news and bad news just inevitable? Is it simply the normal, everyday cost of being the biggest retailer in the world? It's definitely something to think about.